anything we do after is a force multiplier for what we're putting out as craft. So if I have a bad book and then I advertise that bad book, then I'm just throwing money to advertise something that's not very good. And so it's so important to make sure that we are doing the best we can do in terms of artistry, craft, structure, pacing, outlining. Not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but we cannot forget that that's what we do ultimately.
Hello, fellow creative voyagers. This week on the Indie Author Podcast, I have part one of a wide-ranging conversation with Nick Thacker about 6 keys to author success. In this episode, we talk about quality writing, the opportunities and the responsibility of being your own gatekeeper, and how writing the first draft is assembling the raw material of your creation, or maybe like building sandcastles. We talk about professional presentation and the importance of setting the right expectations with your packaging, understanding the cover design tropes of your genre, and ways indie authors can provide better quality than TradPub. And we talk about the 3 buckets of strategic marketing, email, social media marketing, and advertising. And now, let's hear from Nick Thacker for part one of his thoughts about the first 3 of his 6 keys to author success. Hello, and welcome to the Indie Author Podcast. Today, my guest is Nick Thacker. Hey, Nick, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
To give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on you, Nick Thacker is the USA Today bestselling author of over 40 thrillers. He owns and operates Conundrum Publishing and Book Career in a Year, and runs the Write Repeat workshops and writing intensives. He is also the founder of Author Email, the only email marketing platform specifically for authors, and RadioWrite.com, the 24/7 writing inspiration radio platform. And he is the VP of Author Success with Draft2Digital, one of my favorite indie author platforms. His passion is to help authors figure out what their plan is, not just the what, but the how and the why. Yeah.
Hearing my bio from you, Matty, it reminds me of all the things I have to catch up on. There's a lot of things that you said that I'm like, oh, I forgot that I did that. I'm supposed to do that. I have something I owe somebody for that.
Is there anything that I didn't mention that isn't included yet in your bio that we should know of?
No, nothing you should know about, but there strangely enough is other things. There are other things. I'm setting up a web hosting service for authors and a printing company that authors can use for conference materials. But I just thought it was funny hearing all that from you. I'm like, oh, okay, I owe somebody that for that thing and that thing. And I forgot I did that. And
we should have some little automated thing that reads us our bio like once a week so we can go, oh, yeah.
That would be really helpful. I should have ChatGPT do that every morning just to remind myself what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, our topic today is 6 keys to author success. And Nick and I talked about discussing this topic, and I had asked Nick to provide me with 6 bullet points that he would like to cover. And so I'm just going to feed you the bullet points, Nick, and we will see where it takes us from there. Not surprisingly, the first item you put on your list is quality writing, which I think is sometimes an overlooked aspect of a successful author career. So what do you have to say about quality writing?
No, you're exactly right. I do believe this. I actually just did a 3-hour craft intensive on how to write. It was how to outline in genre fiction, specifically thrillers, because that's what I know. I did that this last week, but it was just a reminder of how important this is for us as authors, because at the end of the day, nothing else we do matters if we don't have something good to show the world. The reason I think you're so right, and that it's oft overlooked, and the reason for that, I believe, is 2 things. We either think, well, this is who I am. I'm an artist and this is my art. And I don't know, you can't get better or worse. Like, that's such a weird thing to think of. Like, this is what I have. And so we just sort of ignore it. Or the second thing is it's not easy to change our quality. It's not easy to get better. If we do agree that, hey, I need to get better as an artist, how do you do that? I mean, that's gross, right? Like, you got to practice, and I got to throw words away with the intent of never publishing them. And so it becomes challenging because we want to get better. I think everybody would agree that we want to, but there's not always an easy path, an easy route that we can see will take us, from here to better, however we define that. So it is very important, but ultimately it's the foundation on which we build everything else, and you'll hear me say this too in the marketing part of this, but anything we do after is a force multiplier for what we're putting out as craft. So if I have a bad book and then I advertise that bad book, then I'm just throwing money to advertise something that's not very good. And so it's so important to make sure that we are doing the best we can do in terms of artistry, craft, structure, pacing, outlining. Not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but we cannot forget that that's what we do ultimately. Usually that's why we got into this whole thing, because we like to write. We like to be an artist. We like to do that. I know there's exceptions, but all of us want to write. We want to write books. And it's so important for us to make sure that we're constantly focusing on, is this the best I've got? can I get better? Or is there something obvious where I might be lacking? And then very quickly, as an aside or as kind of an example, my own writing, the last few years, I've really tried to home in on the character development because I felt that that was the weak point for me. That goes into quality writing. And so all the books that I read on craft, on character development, and all the arcs I try to build, and that practice for maintaining and building a better quality around my writing. And, we'll see if it pans out. But the idea is to find those things that we feel, maybe we're a little weaker at. And then, of course, now that it's like building a house or, buy a house and improve the house. As soon as you paint the walls, you realize, oh, wow, the trim looks really ugly, or you paint the trim and it's like, oh, wow, the fixtures are all wrong in here now. So you find the thing that's now the worst thing and you improve that. And that's what I'm doing with my writing all the time. Characters are the focus now, but maybe when I improve those enough, I'll realize that my structural elements aren't really where I think they should be. It's a constant battle, but it's really the foundation of what we do.
I think that there are a couple of seemingly contradictory pieces of advice, especially in the indie publishing world. I think that something that indie publishing has kind of had to grow into is this idea that, like in the early days, I think it was no gatekeepers. I can publish anything I want to. Just slap this piece of crap up on Amazon or whatever. And then I think as things went on, we realized that there was a professional need to have someone other than ourselves assess our work. And so I think it's becoming more the standard that indie authors realize they need an editor's input, they need beta readers' input, they need critique groups and so on. So it's not that there are no gatekeepers, it's that you're your own gatekeeper and you need to usually hire professional help to help you do that. So there's that. You have to make sure the writing is of a quality that you're willing to share with the world and you're going to be happy about that and it's going to be a good experience for your readers. And then there's also the, to counteract the, I'm just going to futz with it for one more year because I know I'll be able to come up with a perfect first sentence if I do that. And the other advice, which is at some point, you've just got to get it out there and move on to the next thing. Do you have any advice for how to balance those two? I'm just going to slap anything up and I'm going to wait another year because I might be able to come up with a better first sentence.
Yeah, I do believe, I think you're exactly right that there is this dichotomy, right? And there has never been a career built on somebody who is constantly churning and improving their book, but never releases it. You don't get to be a writer if you never release anything. Sorry, you can write and you can be a writer. Absolutely. If it's for you and you just put it in a desk drawer and you're just constantly you can still define yourself as a writer. If you want to sell and you want a career as a writer, which implies making money and, all those things, you cannot do that if you don't release the book. And so the goal should be to get to the point where you feel comfortable releasing this book. Now, what you said is true. A lot of times we as authors believe that the book that we're waiting to release, we're waiting because we don't feel like it's good enough. And a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times it's actually because we have a fear around that, putting ourselves out there, the thought of letting the world see our baby, right? You're taking the red pen, marking up our baby. And it's usually based around fear rather than a true lack of quality. If that's where you are as an author, if you're thinking, I cannot release this, it's not good enough, I would bet you 99% of the time it's good enough. It's just it's a fear you have around the actual release process. Now, if there is a truth there as well on the flip side where you feel like you need to rush through the work because you want to make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible. And so you try to write a book every 2 weeks and just publish the first draft. That's probably where you need to slow down and look at your quality and say, is this the best that you can do with what you know right now and who you are right now? Or are you just trying to, check a box to get to the next book? So it is a balancing act, but usually we know if we do the true soul searching, we know if it's actually a quality issue or if it's really fear-based.
Yeah. And I think that if you've taken all the recommended steps, like engaging a professional editor, or if that's not in the cards financially, at least sharing it with readers in that genre or people in your writers group or whatever, and you've done everything you can and you put it out there, then you can use reader reaction to decide whether your assessment of its quality was correct.
That's true. And I highly recommend the first thing you said, even if it's not in the cards, try your best to find someone who's a professional editor, enlist their help. Yes, you'll probably have to pay them something, but you can, you don't have to do a full edit. You can go get a proofreader. You can get somebody to just read your book and give you general feedback. Like, no, this isn't good enough to publish, or yes, this is good enough to publish. This isn't a new industry anymore, is my point. And it's not a secret what makes a book successful. There are still variables and there's a lot of luck involved, sure, but it's not a secret. And quality isn't a secret. We know, hey, there's typos every other word. If you fix those, your book will be better, you know? And we're also in the day of AI, where we have tools that can help us find some of those typos, and things like Grammarly, ProWriting Aid, ChatGPT. They can go through and make your book better in terms of the line copy edit, you know, the line or copy edit. And I'm not saying that that is an alternative for a human. It's not, but it might be that last little push that you need to make sure that your quality is good enough, is going to be accepted as good quality by the reader. But again, it goes back to, you know, usually the writer who isn't very, very new, like maybe they've written a book or two. At that point, you know if the book is truly good enough or not. And if it's not, take the time, make it better, do what you need to do, find the editor, use the tools, whatever, make it better so that you know you're putting out quality into the world. There's a lot of people who will try to game the system, whatever system it is and whatever game it is, and, you know, release crap, and they'll make a little bit of money tomorrow. But the reason we're doing this is because we want to have a career doing it. And that doesn't necessarily just mean money. It means long-term reputation and trust from our readers. And they want to read us for the next 50 years or longer. And so write for that person, write for the reader down the road 50 years from now. That means quality. And that means making sure you're comfortable with what you're putting out there. But again, then the other side of it is, don't wait 50 years making your book perfect, because there's no such thing as perfect. And I actually have read manuscripts from authors who slaved over these books for 5 years and made them worse every time, because at some point it was good enough to release, and that's as good as that author can do because that's their craft, that's where their level is. And they just kind of made it more watered down or more perfect, you know, or whatever. And it just was less fun to read. So that, you know, there's definitely two sides to that coin.
Yeah, there's a metaphor that I'm kind of working on. I haven't quite polished it up to my liking yet, but that to combat the idea of publishing your first draft is that when I was little, there was a beach that my mother would take me and my sister to sometimes. And there was a part of the beach where you could dig in the sand, and under the sand was like clay. And so all the kids would dig up the sand and then dig up the clay and make little things out of them. And I always thought that was a great analogy for a first draft. You know, you dig through the sand, you dig out the clay, and you kind of toss it over your shoulder because you're collecting enough to make a substantial statue of whatever you want to. Nobody would turn around after they had thrown the clay over their shoulder and say, look at the beautiful statue I've made. No, of course you wouldn't do that. You just realize you've created the raw materials for making whatever you want to. So you've gotten the words out there that are the raw materials in your first draft. But then I think, as I'm thinking about what you were saying with regard to those manuscripts that get worse and worse with every revision, once you've created your statue, if you keep picking away at it or polishing away at it, at some point it just becomes kind of a formless blob, and that's not good either. And the trick is finding that perfect balance between I've polished it, but I haven't over polished it into some kind of vanilla or unengaging content.
I love that. That's a good analogy. And it's similar. It reminds me, I was listening to a podcast, and he's an actor from New Girl. Anyway, but he's being interviewed by Dax Shepard, and he says something to the effect of, he's like, I enjoy making movies, doing the stuff in Hollywood, but it's like building sandcastles where the tide's going to come in and ruin your sandcastle every day. I don't want to build the perfect sandcastle. I just like building sandcastles. And if you think of that in terms of your books, and this is an order to you as an author, don't do this. Don't sit there and waste away years and years of your life making the perfect book. I keep putting that in quotes because there's no such thing as perfect. Write the book, get it good enough, release it. That's your sandcastle. It's going to be gone. That success will end tomorrow, whenever. But it's at some point, you'll have a new sandcastle you're working on, and a new sandcastle. And you just need to fall in love with making sandcastles. And over time, just like anything else, those sandcastles will get bigger. They'll get better, more polished, more intricate, whatever. That's how you improve your writing. I really don't think it's going to work if you try to do this with one book. If you just try to wait around for that book to be so perfect that everyone's just going to fall in love with it. Because I got news for you. Not everyone's going to love it. Most of the time, especially if it's your first book, most people won't love it. And it's just so much better and more fun, more rewarding to build multiple sandcastles, to keep writing books and to get better with each one. And this is the iterative process of startups. And I fully buy into that mentality. Like, get your unique selling proposition, get your book good enough, get the minimum viable product in book form, and then move on to the next one and keep iterating, make it better every single time.
Yeah. And I think, of course, that if it all depends on your goal being making this a career, because if your goal is writing your hard book and getting it out there, then that's legit, but you're not going to
Yep.
retire on that.
Right.
So I think all this is a great entree to the second bullet that you had sent me about the 6 keys to author success, which is professional presentation. And we've discussed a little bit about how you need a professional presentation in the writing, but I think this extends beyond just those words on the page. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is the book packaging part. So you've written the book, you've got the content, you've got the interior file, right? But there's more to it than that. When you release a book into the world, there's some expectation we're now running into. Reader expectation, store expectation, your expectation as the writer. And there's all these expectations around what that thing we've created should look and feel like. And all of that goes into this idea of professional presentation. I say professional because you want to make this a career, right? If you don't, then stop listening because this isn't going to be helpful. But if you do want to make this a career, you are saying to the world, I want to be a professional at what I do, which is right, which is being an author. And presenting yourself professionally is presenting your products, which are your books, professionally. So it includes not just the manuscript, but also the cover, the layout. What does it literally look like on the page? The editing. Professionally presented books are going to significantly impact the appeal you have to the readership and publishers if you're going the route of traditional publishing. Even if they may not use those things, if you can put this book package together and say, I know what I'm doing. Look, here's a professional package. That's going to look better in a query letter than anything they get in the slush pile that's just interior files, right? But the point is, understanding this and understanding how the market works and these levers we can pull in marketing is crucial. It's not just fun to do if you have extra time. This is crucial now. We're at a point where there is enough market saturation where a reader will go to an Amazon page, for example, and search for something, a long tail keyword, for example, like fast-paced action thrillers is one I wanted to try to target. I want my books to show up on that page. But there's going to be at least 100 other books that are on that page. And so the reader is going to go through them. And the first thing they're going to see is the cover, right? Maybe the title. And that has to match their expectation. That has to be within the realm of possibility of things that they might like to read. So if someone's searching, for romance and your book shows up and you think, hey, my action adventure thriller is going to get a lot more eyeballs on it if I'm in romance. And so you make that a category. Maybe it will get more eyeballs, but people won't click it because the book packaging isn't presented the right way. It's not right for that genre, right? And I know it feels like I'm belaboring this point, but having a good book cover isn't just icing on the cake. It's the cake itself. It's so important to make sure that your cover is positioning your book into the right market, the right readership. And I've said this before that I truly believe the only thing a book cover does is prevent losing a sale. It doesn't generate a sale. Nobody looks at the book cover and goes, click. If they do that, it's because they recognize the author's name. If I see a Gaiman book, I'm going to click it and buy it. I don't care what it's about. I like that guy. But most of us as authors don't have that sort of name recognition. I certainly wish I did. And so our cover is just going to say, this is what you like to read. Click it and then make sure it's something you want to purchase. And then the rest of the book packaging is important. The description that they first see. The title, again, has to be, if it's a great book and the cover's awesome and the description's great, but then the title of my action adventure thriller is, Rosie and the Steam Train, that doesn't really say action adventure thriller, right? And so that's an important part of packaging as well. And so all these pieces have to be together. And so it became important enough to put as number 2 on this list for me because it's almost as important as what you actually write in the book itself. Long gone are the days where we can just publish a good book and, who cares what the cover looks like? Who cares what the title is? Stick it in a category. There's only 15 other books there, so ours is going to get bought. That's not the way the world works anymore. We're past that. Better or worse, it has to be better. You have to do better. And the professional presentation is crucial to your long-term success.
Yeah, a recommendation I've made it a couple of times before, but I like it so much I use any opportunity to recommend it to people, is that everyone should be subscribing to some kind of email promotional service like BookBub for their genre, because there's really no better market research than to open up an email every day that has books in your genre that a bunch of professional book selectors have selected as things that they think are going to be very popular, and look at the covers and read the descriptions, because I'm especially a huge cover design nerd, and I'm struck by how often there will be a really clear visual consistency across the covers, like
Mhm.
a dark teal and gray background with large sans serif yellow letters. And, that's like the thriller thing. You see one of those, or, for a while it was the woman in the yellow coat running away. And I don't know why
Mhm.
they all had to have a yellow coat, but they all had a yellow coat. And now for certain genres, it's the letters kind of intertwined with
I was
branches
just
and
gonna
things
say,
like that.
yeah, like there's a vine or a
Yeah, the
dragon or
vine
whatever.
over it or something like
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
And even if you're not doing your own covers, this is another area I recommend people get professional help on. Even if you're going to a cover designer, it will help you interact more productively with your cover designer if you're familiar with what those tropes are.
Right.
And then I think also the fact that from the point of view of cover design, getting a cover design done once, even if it's lovely and brand right and genre right and all those things at first, it should probably be revisited periodically, because all those tropes that I just described, the book bub emails would have looked quite different 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. Do you have a sense, like, do you have a schedule where you look at your covers to see if they're still current?
I don't have a regular schedule, but I was a cover designer. I did all my own covers early on, but I was a graphic designer professionally before
Oh,
that.
okay.
So dare I say it, I have a good eye for design. And
Yeah.
so I typically will wait until I get that inkling of a feeling that, hey, maybe these covers are getting out of date. And it's the same reasons you just said. I go to the airport and I look at, there's a very limited selection of books in that Hudson bookstore or whatever it is. And those books that are there aren't there because they're not selling well. They're there because the publishing, the purchasing department decided these are the ones that are going to sell best. And you can see those trends and you can see exactly what other people in my genre are doing, by the minute, up to the minute. And so if I get to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm seeing this being really popular in the genre that I write in, then I'm going to go back to my cover designer, who I have a cover designer who does all this for me. He's doing the same thing, by the way. So sometimes he'll say, hey, you don't have to pay me for this yet, but I'm just saying this is kind of a trend and these covers don't work yet. They no longer work in that genre. But between the two of us, we'll say, all right, this series needs an overhaul. And that may happen once every year. If we're lucky, it's not that often. I think my main Harvey Bennett series, I've redesigned some of the earlier books, maybe 5 times total.
Oh, wow.
And I'm hoping the iteration we're on now is going to be one that I can keep, right? Because I paid a lot of money for it. Hopefully we can keep that for the next 4 years. But I'm not in charge of setting those trends. I wish I were, but you're exactly right. Like there definitely is a time period where, hey, it's been a while. Maybe let's do a deep dive into what's working in this genre in terms of cover design. And do mine fit, and be honest with yourself, because it could mean more sales if you get it changed into more of a trend. All this to say, I don't think we should just chase trends blindly. Like you said, the intertwined text with the typography, that's really big in psych thrillers and women's fiction right now. That's not what I write. And so chasing that trend would be detrimental to these books' success, because there's an expectation now that's lost. The readers are going to open it up and be, this is what I wanted. This is about like, bombs and Jack Reacher type stuff. And that's not what I thought. This isn't Colleen Hoover. So it is important to understand what these trends are, but specifically the trends within our genre. It's when it comes to cover design, because what we're trying to do isn't gain more. We're not trying to get more sales. We're just trying to prevent people from going, ew, that cover's old and out of date. I'm not even going to bother reading what it's about.
Yeah. You do yourself more harm by getting your book in the hands of someone it's not right for than you do, you pay the price for that sale in unhappy reviews and so on.
Yeah.
And I think that for both, it's interesting that for both quality writing and professional presentation, we've talked about the importance of genre-specific knowledge and direction, that it's important to get a beta readers in your genre, an editor in your genre, a book cover designer in your genre, not just some person who did a beautiful book cover design, but it was for,
Right.
a poem, a poetry collection or something like that. And you're writing horror. Although that actually might be a pretty good combination. Right. I don't know. I have to think about that.
That could work. I absolutely could have some horror Lovecraft style poetry.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. It is so important to understand, we're writing in a genre. And usually I don't have to, beat this point into someone's head, because if they're writing in that genre, they're a reader of that genre, which means they're a consumer of that genre. They see the book covers, they see, the book descriptions used, the keywords, the main big trends, sparkling vampires, whatever it is, because they're reading that genre. That's their favorite genre. Not always the case. There's definitely situations. I'm writing a sweet hockey romance right now, which is not my genre, but I am doing the research. I'm like, okay, well, now I need to make this my genre. I need to understand what the tropes are, especially with romance, right? How important are tropes in romance? But it's important to know, just by being a consumer, a lover of that genre, you're going to get these trends. You're going to see them because Amazon's going to show them to you. They know what you like to read. They're going to say, well, what do you think of this category? And you'll see all the covers. So paying attention to that kind of stuff isn't as hard as we're making it out to be. It's really just a matter of reading in that genre, studying that genre, just being present there, and you'll get marketed to by other authors. So it'll be pretty easy to find some of those things.
Yeah. I also think that there's this kind of reverse engineering aspect of this, that if you think you're writing hard-boiled thrillers and you subscribe to the hard-boiled thriller email newsletter and you look at it and none of it looks appealing, guess what? You may not be writing hard. Actually, it's a cozy, or, sometimes you need a little reality
Very
check
true.
too. And that kind of research can be a good way to do that.
Absolutely.
And the other thing I'll add there is that I used to say early on in my indie author career, I would say that there's no reason that indie authors can't provide a product that's just as good as traditional publishers can. But now I really think that in many cases, especially ebooks, indie authors can provide a much better product, because I'm surprised at how
Mhm.
still print-centric traditional publishers are and how bad their
Right.
ebooks can be, like badly formatted, just
Yeah.
like a bad experience. And so there's no harm in setting the bar higher than what the big five or the big four, however many bigs there are these days, are putting out.
You're absolutely right. Traditional publishing is so frustrating to watch, with kind of a 10 feet away kind of view, because they make decisions that seem so incompetent, and they're not. They're just in a whole different world. The way that their economies work is entirely different than what you and I live in and breathe every day. And it's exactly true with that. I mean, they're almost obligated not to reinvent, or to reinvent the wheel when it comes to things like layout and formatting, because it's somebody's job to do that. And it's job security to
Yeah.
make sure that they're still doing that. They're on their own with Microsoft Word or InDesign, heaven forbid. And they're not going to use something like Vellum, because that would make it so easy that they
Yeah.
wouldn't have a job anymore. So, it's one of those things where
Yeah.
you're right. You get a traditionally published book. I just had one. It was a couple nights ago. Downloaded a new book from a big four publisher. And I was like, this is atrocious. I just want to reach out and be like, can I do this again for you? Just give me the Word file. This isn't supposed to be hard. It's 2024. We're well past this being hard.
Yeah.
So it makes me mad, but hey, I'm a software guy too. So I understand some of the reasons why, but it does look like incompetence on their part when it comes down to what the consumer sees.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. A number of episodes ago, I interviewed Leslie Penelope, who has extensive experience in both the traditional and indie worlds. And we were talking, and she said, well, one difference is that indie publishers' customers are the reader and traditional publishers' customers are bookstores. And
Mhm.
that took me so by surprise that I think I
Yeah.
just had to take a beat, because I had never thought of it that way. And it was such a bizarre way to think about it. But obviously she knows, she has experience on both sides.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yeah.
it's also true that it depends on the publisher. It's not just indie and traditional. There's a huge spectrum. And I think early on, indie authors picked up many great practices from traditional publishers. Now I think that traditional publishers are picking up many good practices from indie authors. And, so
Sure.
there's a
One
spectrum.
speaks to the other. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. One speaks to the other for sure. And you're so right that a traditional publishing house is positioning books to be sold to the one purchaser, for the company purchasing.
Right.
If it's Barnes and Noble, there's one person,
Yes.
sitting behind a desk looking at a catalog once a quarter going, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and then a number, how many we want per store. They have
Yep.
250 stores in the United States alone, whatever it is, and that's the books that are going to be. So that's the person.
Yeah.
And it's mind-boggling that that's true, but it's absolutely true.
Yep.
That person doesn't necessarily know anything about the readership of the genre. They probably only themselves read in one or two, maybe three genres. And so they don't know what's happening in anime. They don't know what's happening in memoir, because they don't read those. They just look at, here's what the publisher gave me, and this looks intriguing to me.
Yep.
It's mind-boggling, but that's absolutely true.
Yeah, it is mind-boggling. So the next of the 6 keys to author success is strategic marketing. So now that we have a quality writing and we have professional presentation, what would you have to say about strategic marketing?
Make it strategic. There's no shortage of marketing activities, tactics, tips that you can try as an author. There used to be a shortage, but not anymore. There is somebody out there willing to take your money and say, let's try this, let's do this. And so if you don't approach this category with strategy, you're going to spend more money than is required. When I'm saying that, while also knowing that if you do something like advertising, which I think every author should do, you're also going to be spending more money than is needed, because that's how advertising works. You spend more money than it ultimately required to keep an ad campaign running, because you want to get test data and you try and fail so many times and iterate. So you don't have that much money to throw at this marketing game in general. If you're doing advertising well, you're already spending a lot of money, right? So the point is to be strategic about this. Very simply, I put marketing for authors, I break it down into 3 buckets that I think every author should be doing. Not necessarily start these at the same time, but they should be doing. If you get into this and say, this is the career I want to focus on, this is what I need to be doing. The 3 things are email marketing, social media marketing, and advertising. And probably in that order. If you're brand new to this game and you only have 1 book out, really probably not a good use of your time and money and energy to be advertising that book. A lot of reasons why we can dig into, but the point is, wait until you have 3, 4, 5, 6 books out before you start throwing advertising dollars at it. Because again, it's a force multiplier. So if you have 6 points of entry to a series and you advertise the first one, you also have 6 products that you can sell to that person when they click through. And that means you have more income, more ROI is higher than if you just had 1 book, right? So that's the reason. But going in order, email marketing is essentially, I say effectively, it's not free because you have to have an email service provider. And these days they all cost money. So some of them, if you have fewer than 2,000 subscribers, you can do certain things for free. But let's just make it easy and say that this is going to cost a little bit of money, but it's a little amount of money. I run author email, so shameless self promotion. It's $10.99 a month for up to 10,000 I think 9,999 subscribers to be accurate. And you can send as many times as you want. There's no restriction. We allow you to have autoresponders. We allow you to do segmentation. We allow you to do templates. There's no limitations on it. We don't feature gate that in that way. And so email marketing in general is very affordable. But the point is, you should be building a mailing list from day 1, maybe before day. Hey, I'm gonna write a book and I'm gonna launch the book. Sign up for my mailing list and find out more. This is something we should absolutely be doing on day 1 as an author. And then once we start building a little small readership and developing these relationships with individuals on that list, it might be worth our time and energy to start using social media, because that's also free. You can get on TikTok, you can get on Facebook, wherever your readers congregate, wherever that genre typically spends their time online, have some sort of presence there. Be willing to say, hey, I'm going to spend an hour a week, no more. If you don't hate social media, do an hour a week. Scheduling some things I can send out. Make some funny memes or jokes about your content, or give us the behind the scenes view of what it looks like in your writing cave. Whatever it is, do something, because even though it will not be a quick path to success, you're not going to have people buying your book tomorrow. It is so valuable over 5 years, 10 years of doing this kind of thing, at least weekly, if not daily. And, like I said, I can talk a lot longer about that. That's probably the next big thing to do as an author. And then finally, once you do have the first 2, you're writing good books, craft is there, and you're presenting it really well, then you can start using advertising to multiply that force, because it's now a force for good. It's a force for benefit of your career, And so you can use advertising. Facebook ads, BookBub ads, and Amazon ads are the top 3. And those are pretty much the only 3 that I pay attention to these days, at least in terms of putting most of my budget toward. But those are the ways to get people into the top of your funnel, as we say, into your world. At least they've heard of you now. Maybe they've clicked over to your website and seen your stuff. So there's that little cookie pixel on their computer now, so you can retarget them. But very simply, it's also a way to get people to go and see your books and say, hey, this is something I'd like to read. Let me buy it. So advertising is a very, very, very powerful way to find new eyeballs who have never heard of you before, and a way to find people who have maybe heard of you but aren't quite sure, and then convert both those people into a subscriber or somebody who's a fan of your book, somebody who actually buys and reads them. Those are the big 3. That's what I would say. Strategic marketing comes down to email marketing, social media marketing, and advertising.
I just had an interesting experience on the advertising front that I kind of always believed this, but this was such a stark example that I was at 20 Books Vegas, and one of the presenters was giving a presentation on Facebook ads. And I was already working with someone in this person's organization on Facebook consulting. And during the Q&A portion, somebody asked a question, and it was like, what came out was this guy was spending over $100 a day in Facebook advertising. And she said, well, just stop doing that right away. And in stark contrast, and his feeling was, well, if I spend $100, I'm making this much. If I spend $200, I'm going to make twice as much, or, hopefully some multiple. And she was explaining that really wasn't the case necessarily. And at the same time, I was working with this consultant from this woman's group on my Facebook ads. And I worked with Facebook ads enough that I kind of understand the theory behind it, but I hated doing it. And so I get together with this person for 1 hour a month for $50. It's $50 for an hour. And we go over my Facebook ads and she tells me what to tweak. And then I just do kind of like checking in for the next month. And then we meet again. And it's working out really well for me. But the thing that really struck me about it is that I'd always spent like $5, $10 a day on Facebook ads. And she said, well, let's start at 5 and see how it goes. And so we had an ad that was doing pretty well. So I said, well, should I put it up to 10? Because for some reason, I always defaulted to going in increments of 5. And she said, oh, no, let's go to 6. And I thought, I appreciate so much that someone's willing to say, don't go to 10, go to 6. Like, not only don't spend $100, but don't even spend $10 until we know that $6 is going to work as well. And I think that's really valuable for people who are beginning to dip their toe in advertising to hear, because you don't have to make a huge investment. In fact, you shouldn't make a huge investment to begin with. You should be testing, and gradually ramping up if things are going well.
Absolutely. And I agree with that advice. A lot of times the understood, or I guess, or often, recited way to do it is increasing a budget daily by 10 to 20%. So $5 to $6 makes perfect sense. 20% or whatever. And that's a good way to do it, because you will not shock the system, whatever one, if it's Facebook ads, Amazon, they kind of all work similarly in terms of, if you put too much budget at it too fast, it can freak out. And so with Facebook ads specifically, there is so much data that has nothing to do with books, but can be used to make decisions as to, what people might like to click on. And that Facebook's job is Facebook, the Meta Business Suite. That's what it does. And so when you have a $5 a day ad and all of a sudden, hey, this is working really well. My click-through rate's good. My purchase rate is up there. My ROAS, all that is good. I'm ready to scale. Let's start spending $100 a day. It's not Facebook being mad at you and wanting to steal your money, why that ad will suddenly stop or stall or not work as well. It's doing its job. It's saying, okay, this worked, but now you're forcing me to find, exponentially more amount, of people every single day. And I don't have any more who liked this particular thing that my black box algorithm found that led to them clicking when it was $5 a day. There's no more of those people. I've already hit those people. So it has to all of a sudden, very quickly, within 24 hours, find new people that might click on your ad. And it's not going to get that right every single time. So I hope that makes sense. Like, the reason you scale slowly is because you want to make sure Facebook finds a little bit more people every day. And then, okay, that didn't work. So tomorrow, Facebook at the same budget level is going to try to find a different they're pulling a different lever behind the scenes, right? They're pulling the people who like James Rollins may not click the ad. People who like Clive Cussler did, or people who watch Indiana Jones click it, but then, wow, it advertised to Dan Brown, movies, and nobody clicked that. Whatever it is, it all happens in the black box. And all we get out of it is, well, my click-through rate went down today. We don't know why, but that's just what happens behind the scenes. But if you scale really big quickly, then you don't know anything. No more information. You just know that you spent $95 more than you did the day before, and you don't have anything better to show. So why not spend $6 for a week, and then 6 or 7.5 for a week, and then 9, and just keep scaling that way by 10 to 20%, very, very slowly. And it's really hard to do. The authors were like, hey, this works. I did it. I've got the images designed. I'm not a marketer. I don't want to do this all day. Well, I'm just going to jack it up to $100, and for the best, I'll check it in 2 weeks. And then we spent $2,000, and we're like, that didn't work at all. That's not what I meant. So it is important to scale slowly when it comes to advertising, but it does work. It's a game we should all be playing and iterating and testing and all the things that are required within that.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Nick. What did you think about our metaphors of writing a first draft being like digging clay out of the sand, or like building sandcastles? I would love to hear your thoughts, and stay tuned for part 2 of this conversation coming in the next episode, when Nick will be talking about building an author platform, networking and community, and adaptability and persistence. And if you got value from this episode and were thinking, I wish I could buy Matty a cup of coffee, you can do that. Scroll to the bottom of any page at theindyauthor.com and click Buy Me a Coffee to make a small contribution via PayPal or Stripe. Until next time, here's wishing you favorable winds and smooth sailing on your creative voyage.